Hi guys, my name is April Stone and I'm an alcoholic. I have a sobriety date. My sobriety date is April 19 of 2013. I have a sponsor. My sponsor knows she's my sponsor, and very important, guys. And I get the privilege of sponsoring other women even when it doesn't always feel like a privilege. And I always start with that joke because it's how I gauge the room, and because my first sponsor is actually in the room today, the first woman who took me through the steps, and I was not an easy sponsee. And so, which is how I got to my other sponsor, but I'm so emotional right now, so you guys are gonna have to bear with me, and it's my podium, so you're just gonna have to deal with it, but I'm so sorry to have missed my beautiful friend Amanda last night and Terry. I have 3 kids. I have a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 9-year-old. My 9-year-old is in, that hardcore travel baseball scene, and he had a game yesterday, and mom's not allowed to miss games. And so I had to, and originally when I took the commitment, I checked the baseball schedule and it was free, and then it wasn't free, and I just appreciate Anne's grace with being gentle with me with that, because I believe I make the sacrifices for my program, my kids don't. As we can see here, we have hundreds of beautiful, sober women in AA. My son has one mom who shows up at games, and my sponsor reminded me of that when God blessed me with that baby, is that there's lots of us here, and it's not that I use that as an excuse, but he has one mom, and I'm at the things he wants me to be at. So, I'm so sorry not to be here last night. I love you. I'm so glad you guys are doing a redo tomorrow. Josephine and Lizzie, where are you? Where are you? It's okay. Amazing. I just wanted to say amazing, amazing, amazing. I love AA. It's the only place that we come. And I don't know you, but I know you and I love you, and I don't feel that way about everyone out there. But, amazing job. The inventory process is such an important process, and you guys did an incredible job, incredible job. And you guys had me crying and connected to spirit, and then 2 hours in agony about having to go after you. So thank you for that too. And Pam, excited to hear you as well, and Mari, you beautiful, beautiful woman. I don't think you realize how you touched me in early sobriety. It's as a sober mom, I hear your voice in my head. I want to let you know that you're one of the voices. Here I go, crying again. And you're one of the voices that I hear in my head. And so when I got to just know that I was going to be with you this weekend, I knew that, you bring God with you everywhere. And I knew it was going to be a good weekend because you were here. And thank you for Anne and anybody who had the part of doing just this weekend. AA conferences are so important. And I'm going to get on a soapbox and then I'll get off it really quick. These conferences, COVID had an effect on them. I help with conferences down in South Florida. If you are here and in your seat, hug a person who has done service here. It's a lot of work. And usually people, when the conference is over, they want to tell you what they would have done, but they're not really going to help you next year. So if you loved it, make sure that they know how much you appreciate the work. And if you loved it, consider helping out next year, because it's much easier when you have support, and bring a friend. Because, that's the struggle that we're having. I helped put on a conference in South Florida, and attendance is an issue. Attendance is an issue. And, when I love things, I buy tickets even if I can't go. You know what I mean? Because somebody has to pay for the ballroom and somebody has to pay for the stuff. And, because, the hotels, they're not AA people, and so, the traditions, I guess, don't apply to them. And so, if you love it, all I'm saying is do your little part. And, I'll get to 6 and 7 now. So, I'm like old school AA. You're going to have to hear part of my story because I believe that you have to know that I'm an alcoholic and connect with me in the problem before you realize that my solution can also be your solution. That's how it was done for me, and that's going to be how I do it till the day I die, God willing. And so, I grew up in an alcoholic home. I always start with that because I love, and again, I love what was said earlier. Information will never get me sober. And I am a firm believer that if information was enough, alcoholic homes wouldn't produce alcoholics, plain and simple. At least the alcoholic home I grew up in, there was physical abuse, there was emotional abuse, there was a ton of neglect. I remember having this fun game as a kid where I would hide to see if anybody would notice I was missing. No one ever went looking for me. And, it was just that home. And I don't say that to condemn my parents. I don't say that for any other reason than to say if information was enough for us guys, if it was anything other than God that was going to get us sober, alcoholic homes wouldn't produce alcoholics because we experience firsthand of what alcoholism does. And I remember, and I always start with that because one of my earliest memories as a child was swearing to God that I was never going to be an alcoholic. I swore to God. And I say that, and this is the other thing. You know how our big book talks about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Like my first example of that was my father because I loved my dad. I loved him. He was this like super loving, incredible dad. And he was always the one, my mom worked a lot and, whenever we would have the things that kids do, it was my dad who showed up at things. And when I had a bad day and I was crying about something, it was my dad that provided the comfort. And then he drank and he would immediately transform into this other person, this violent person, this crazy person. And there would be those drag out fights in the middle of the night. And, sometimes the kids were a part of like that physical abuse. And I remember just going, why the heck do you drink? Like, if that's what happens when you drink, why do it? Because clearly it happens more than one time. So, don't you see the correlation? I'm 6. I see the correlation, and I didn't get it. But I knew I wanted no part of it once I was an adult. And I'm a person that does well in school. And so I would, my dad was in the military. My mom's an immigrant from the Philippines. My mom's an immigrant from the Philippines. My dad was an infantryman in the Marine Corps. Neither of them went to college. But they were like really big on the school thing. And I think it was, they wanted me to have an opportunity that they didn't. And I do well in school. My dad gets stationed to San Francisco, and I get an Oprah Winfrey scholarship to go to a fancy boarding school. Because, I do well on the tests they do, and then they make you do an interview to make sure your social skills aren't that terrible. Little did they know I would drink, and then that's where the social skills would end. And I end up going to this boarding school, and this boarding school that I go to, there's kids there where their parents are like in politics from other countries. There was like one of the first girls I drank with was like a Johnson & Johnson heir. And I remember getting to that school and immediately feeling different. I'm browner than everyone. I'm poorer than everybody else. Like, I can look at you, I can look at me. I clearly do not belong with you people. And alcoholic thinking is a problem. And if I take you through the steps, we start looking at the screwed up thinking. And because, I could have also looked at it like, wow, I earned my seat to be here. Nobody handed it to me. I earned it. But, instead, that mental twist that existed in me from the very beginning was, I'm different and I don't deserve to be here. That's how I perceived it. And, the girls get together and I get an invitation to go into the woods and go drink. And even though I've sworn to myself that I'm never going to do this, I'm so desperate to connect with you and be a part of that I just go do it. Like, I really at that point have no interest in drinking. I really just want to go and be with you and be a part of the thing that all the people are doing. That's my experience. And so I go pay $20 for my, that how we did it in boarding schools. You'd pay $20 and you'd get a bottle like that of clear whatever alcohol. And my sponsor, Miss Sue, she says, like, when she had her first drink, I instinctively knew to chug it. And that was like my experience as well. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to teach me these things. There's like, just like this spiritual, like, compulsion forward. And, I drank, and I loved the effect so much that I completely forgot that I swore that I was never going to be an alcoholic and that I never was going to drink. The big book and I will quote the big book a lot. I like it. I love big books. If you know the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and what it took to get this book, we listened to Sandy on the way up, and we listened to the history of all of the almost things that happened, and we didn't have a book. And, God made sure it happened, and he made sure that, because, back in the day, there was no internet. You couldn't just pull a big book. Somebody had to write it down and mail it out, and but it was so important. They wanted our message there because they were like, this is how people are going to get sober. If Bill can't get to you, and if Dr. Bob can't get to you, we want this book to get to you. And thank God. And I've been lucky to be sponsored by the book. So when you listen to me, you're going to have to listen to the book. But the doctor's opinion says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And I don't believe that that's what makes us an alcoholic. I think it's the line that follows. That while we admit is injurious, that after a time we can't differentiate the true from the false. Because guys, I have a lot of normie friends. They drink, they get an effect, they like it. Their sense of reality never shifts so that they can continue to justify the next drink. That's why what I think connects all of us who are sitting here today is that my sense of reality will shift in order to justify picking up the next drink. I cannot connect the dots of what alcohol is doing to me. And so I get to boarding school, I get introduced to alcohol, and, you'll hear a lot of my pet peeves, but one of my pet peeves in Alcoholics Anonymous is when people are defining their alcoholism. And that's why I loved when you talked about, in 5, about, when you woke up and it was how you felt. It was how you felt. Because the truth of the matter is like, I'm a firm believer that, like, if you're an alcoholic, the consequences might not be drastic, but we start spiritually changing immediately to justify the drinking. And I'll tell you, I went to that boarding school. I told you a little bit about my mother. I told you a little bit about my dad, and we won't get into it because I have to get to 6 and 7. But, this scholarship was a huge deal. People in my family didn't go to college. My dad grew up in poverty in Oregon. Like, his family, they were immigrants who came over. My mom was an immigrant from the Philippines. My mom had 2 siblings that died of starvation in the Philippines. And so when her and my grandmother came to this country and I had that opportunity, my grandmother used to, like, hold me and say things like, you are an answer to prayer. This is an answer to prayer. And I felt it. And I remember going and feeling those things. And I told you I'm going to cry. But, and wanting to make my family proud. But I get introduced to alcohol, and even though my primary purpose in going to that school was to get good grades, go to an Ivy League school, become president of the United States, no alcoholic grandiosity, none, humility comes naturally, right? We'll get to 6 and 7. I get introduced to alcohol, and it starts shifting immediately. All of a sudden, I don't care that much about studying. All of a sudden, I'm telling you, I came out of the womb needing to be the best, needing to be number one. Like, we still cannot play Monopoly in my home because it's such an aggressive thing. Seriously, it's sick. But, I get introduced to alcohol and I start giving it away immediately. I start, why I'm there shifts. And think about it immediately. Immediately, the people who drink the way that I want to drink, those are my friends. And if that's not a powerful thing, that's a very powerful thing, because today you need to be honest. You need to be a person I respect. You need to be a person that, like, we're evenly yoked on some spiritual things to be my friend. But back then, you just need to drink. You just need to allow me to drink the way that I want to drink with no judgment, no pain. Don't say nothing. You know what I mean? And that's a huge thing. That is a huge thing. And if I sponsor you, we connect those dots. And, I go to that boarding school, and again, it was an Ivy League feeder school. And I did okay at that school, but because I'm drinking, I don't do what probably God had intended for me to do at that school. I start diverting my course, and I'm a blackout drinker by the time I'm 16 years old. I don't know if there's any other blackout drinkers in this room, but I don't know about you, but I black out and I do things that I'm not proud of. I have yet to find the person who blacks out and does donates to charity, is a great friend. I experience moral, I don't know that person. If you are that person, see me at the line at the end of the meeting. But, and when you're 16 and again, the shame, I know, you may not know what I did, but I know what I did. And I have to drink more to make that go away, right? And, I go to the college counselor, my junior year of school, and she's like, okay, April, let's start looking at colleges. And I remember looking at that counselor and going, where is everyone else not going? Because that's what alcoholism does to me. I need a geographical cure. And I'm like a liar, so I need to go somewhere where no one knows me so I can lie about who I am. And that's my story. In my alcoholism, they say alcoholism is progressive. And I love what was said about logic and evidence because, when I went through the book and how I go through the book is there's all of the spiritual meat here, but I need to connect my experience to the book. I need to identify with the problem so that I can identify with the solution. If I don't identify with the problem, when the solution gets hard, I'm not going to want to do it. And so, what ends up happening is that that alcoholic degradation that takes me 4 years to create at that boarding school takes me 3 years to create in college. I'm in my junior year of college and I'm looking at exchange programs so that I can just not be around these people anymore. And what ends up happening at a Super Bowl party my junior year of college is I end up getting attacked by 2 men in a blackout the way that alcoholic women get attacked. And it scared me. It scared me really bad. And, people were talking about it and there was it sucked. And I decided to do my last year of college in England. And I remember thinking, it's going to be different this time. I'm going to go there. I'm going to get serious about school. And I remember it was the first time, I'm 20 years old, can't even have a legal drink in the United States. And I'm trying to figure out how to control my drinking like they talk about in the big book. It's I'm going to go there and I'm going to get serious about school so that I can, try to control what's going on with my alcoholism. I have no idea that I can't control any of it. And what took me 4 years, the degradation that took me 4 years to create in high school, 3 years to create in Southern California, took me 1 year to recreate in England. Because even though I swear to God that it's going to be different when I get there, I get to the dorms, and my dorm they had pubs, and this is what's insane. I thought I could go to England and my drinking would be better in England because I had this idea that my drinking was so bad because I was living in Southern California, and if I just got away from the Mexican border, I'd be safer in England. Hook me up to a lie detector test, I believe it. And 1 year, same consequences, 1 year in England. And, I get to Florida and, I go to law school. And I'm going to tell you, as somebody who grows up really poor, I really believed that once I had money, I was going to be fine. That sounds stupid and shallow, but I've always had this deep-seated insecurity in my soul that alcohol made go away. This feeling of I'm horrible, I'm terrible, I'm not good enough. And I thought it was because I was poor and brown. I swear to God. And I just thought that once, I graduated from law school, got a really great, probably a job I didn't deserve. And I thought when I had the money and I could buy the house and I had the BMW, I was going to feel fine. I didn't feel fine. And what ended up happening was that's also about the time alcohol quit working for me. And I felt crazy because I had all of the things that I thought were supposed to make me happy. And I was dying out on the inside, and I couldn't drink it away. I would try to drink, and I wasn't getting any relief anymore. And I was married at the time. I took a hostage because that was the other thing I tried to do was I married a guy that I thought like he was another one. He had he had things in Jacksonville with his family's last name on him, and I'm like, and again, like I thought if I had the guy that was good on paper that I would be okay. I was not okay, and instead of sitting there going, I need to find God and get right with my life. Like I think it's the husband's fault, so I get rid of him and I meet a man. And I meet a man who drinks the way that I drink, and I think I'm in love because drinking is my master. And, it sped up my bottom, thank God. I look back on it and, I can get into the shame and the remorse of all of it. But what ends up happening is in a blackout, I have a suicide attempt. And that guy I was dating at the time had a name that was very close in the contact list to my boss's. And my suicide text message goes to my boss, Mr. Brown. So when I did my first inventory, Mr. Brown was there. But I look back on it and thank God, guys, because Mr. Brown was one of those annoying people who wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning, like I do now, to start his day, and he's not up till ungodly hours of the night, and he saved my life. He put me on a little 72-hour vacation and saved my life. And when I woke up during that 72-hour vacation, for those of you who have not attempted suicide, you get a 72-hour vacation, and I wake up, I'm tied to the bed. And not in the way I prefer to be tied to a bed. And these people are saying crazy things like, you shouldn't drink. And I don't know about you guys, but my alcoholism comes with a rebuttal system in my own voice. My alcoholism speaks to me in my own voice. So even though, a logical human who was that close to death would typically get advice from a medical professional and go, I will do whatever you say. Not this alcoholic. My alcoholism goes, well, where did you go to school? You're clearly an idiot. You think you can diagnose me in 10 minutes? But that's the cunning, baffling, powerful thing about alcoholism, guys. And, after that little 72-hour vacation, I attempted to go to work like nothing had happened. And Mr. Brown calls me into his office and tells me, hey, you need to go to rehab. And I tell him, no, thank you. And it's up in Jacksonville, and he was from Georgia, and he was like, sweetheart, I know I phrased it like a request. It's not a request. He goes, you don't go to rehab, you can't work here anymore. And I'm going to tell you, that's how I got to rehab. And I had no intentions. Meetings would come in. I had zero intentions of staying sober when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Zero. And I wanted the consequences to go away. So when I went to rehab, I got to stay for a long time because I was not listening to anything that they told me to do. And they basically kept me as long as my insurance allowed me to stay. And I'm going to tell you, the only reason I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, you guys, was that guy I was dating had gotten DUI number 5 when I was in rehab. And he needed a ride to Alcoholics Anonymous. And, he would end up breaking up with me. And he had told me, and I'll give you the version I'm allowed to say behind the podium, he was like, a lady, he didn't say lady, like you will never stay sober. You're too mean. You think you know everything. You think you're better than everybody else. And he goes, and I actually want to be sober, so I want to stay away from you. And again, I was going to show him that I was going to stay sober, and he was going to be wrong. And, I ended up getting a sponsor because I was going, ultimately, because I was just, and I almost drank. It was Florida, Georgia weekend. You guys can appreciate the reference. And I almost drank. And my credit card wouldn't work. And it wasn't because I had no money. So I always I remember once at a meeting, somebody was like, well, if you have no money, like the card doesn't work. And I was like, well, just so you know, like my miracle, I had money in that. And it's again, we're 6 and 7, so I let you guys know the sickness of my mind, okay? And I called Linda, and Linda told me to meet her at a lunchtime meeting. And at that lunchtime meeting in Jacksonville, we read the steps, we read the traditions, we read the 9th step promises. And she had asked me to read the 9th step promises at that meeting. And I couldn't read it. It was like, we'll know happiness, we'll know peace, all of those things. And it was like that still quiet voice was like, these aren't even extravagant promises, and you have none of this. And it was one of those things where I look back on it now, and I love the stories in AA because, alcoholism, we can't differentiate the true from the false. Our alcoholism has such a strong control of our mind. And then God comes in with these little nuggets. And you guys, I think the spirit of AA is those nuggets get dropped, and we choose what we do with the nugget. I am powerless against alcohol. But I have a choice when God drops those nuggets. Sometimes it just blows past me. But if I slow down, it's what am I going to do with that nugget? And I remember we did the 3rd step prayer after that meeting on my knees, and it was a gross clubhouse, guys. And I remember just being like, this better work because this floor is gross. I remember thinking that in my head. And we did a 4 and a 5, and it took me a while to do 4 and 5 because I don't know about you guys, but I started to fall in love with my sponsor, and I really wasn't that confident that she would like me when I said everything. There was things on there that horrible things that had happened to me that I swore to God I wasn't going to tell anybody. Horrible things that I had done to other people that I swore to God that I was never going to tell anybody. And and when that 5th step was over, she did what a good sponsor does. Me too, me too, me too. And I remember leaving that 5th step and not knowing God could love me yet, but I knew God loved her. And so when I left, I was I left my 5th step going, well, maybe God can love me eventually too. And now we're at 6 and 7 because you guys, I love inventory. But this alcoholic, if I stay at inventory, just another way for me to obsess about me. It's just another way for me to obsess about me. And I'll tell you, there was a period in my sobriety where I had inventory, and then nothing after. Because, it's and if I take my inventory to all these people and share my inventory, we have to talk about me. And, not knocking anybody's experience, but I think that you can do a lot not drinking, but emotional sobriety, no, there is no emotional sobriety without 6 through 12. And what I think happens after inventory, and I remember doing that inventory with you, Linda, and I went to this 5th step meeting once, and there was this girl who was like, and now I can feel the wind beneath my wing. It was just it was so obnoxious. Judgmental. I remember leaving that meeting so freaking pissed. And I called Linda. And I was like, we freaking did this step wrong. You know what I mean? We did it wrong. I just got out of this meeting. Everybody feels great. I don't feel great after this step. Don't. And we, in her wisdom, we read the 5th step promises. And what occurred to me was this was the beginning of my spiritual experience. And one of the things that she pointed out was I know who I am what my inventory showed me is who I am when there is no God in my life. And thank you for that. I always share that with inventory because what a good inventory does is it shows me who April is when there is no God in my life. And, and I can get really fancy with the character defects, but, in my experience and just being sober for a little bit, everybody has different ones, right? But character defects, it's just what I do when I just don't trust God with all of my life. That's it. If I am not fully aligned with God as I understand God, I need a character defect. Like if I don't trust God with what I think he wants me to do, like my character defects don't exist when I am fully surrendered and I fully trust the power of God. They just don't. You know, and whether it's my perfectionism or my anger or my vanity, all of it stems at the core of fear and not trusting God. And when I do 6 and 7 with people, I was like, you know, you may like to steal, you may like to lie, but at the end of the day, would you need to do that if you trusted God in this moment with your whole heart? I mean, if we want to talk about it after me, but that's been my experience with 6 and 7. Is my character defects show me where I need to trust God a little bit more. And the truth of the matter is those character defects, they're and Linda, you know, because you had me in the beginning, girl, but those character defects, they're like, I used to think that they were so cute, you know, like my sarcasm, my snarkiness, like, you know, like, but at the end of the day, character defects are not cute, they hurt people. And typically the character defects that I have hurt the people that I love the most. And there's nothing cute about that. Like, you know, I don't want to like beat myself up, but you know, when we have to move on and like all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, I believe who my higher power wants me to be is a person who like shares love, light, whatever the heck you guys want to cover, but who like that people come to me. And character defects can only exist in our relationships. Think about it. It's not a defect of character until it hurts somebody. And the scary thing about character defects, guys, is I don't get to control who they hurt. If I'm not working 6 and 7, like if I could just make sure that like my character defects were only unleashed on all the mothers that I hate on my PTA, I'd be fine with it. Amanda knows, she's inventoried. Me and her have done inventory on the moms at my kids' school. And we have a story, Amanda, on that same mom, a recent one. But it's not that way. The character defects, it's like if I struggle with anger, if I struggle with like perfectionism, if I struggle with ambition, you know, it's going to come out on my husband, it's going to come out on my kids, it's going to come out on my parents. And I believe that one day at a time, God wants me to not have character defects. God wants me to fully trust him so that I can share love in a world that desperately needs it. And to spread unity, because character defects create division. And that's why they're not cute. That's why they're not funny. They create pain. And so let's talk about a few. So when I first got sober, Mr. Brown ended up firing me because I just was not doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I think that he thought once I stopped drinking, I was immediately going to be a great attorney again. And it just took me a bit. And because my reputation was so bad, it took me a long time to find work. Like I couldn't find any lawyer works. I tried to work at McDonald's. They tell me I was like way overqualified. And I was like, well, can I tell FPL that I'm overqualified when they want my electricity bill? But, you know, that's another story. But, you know, and I had a friend who was like, hey, April, do you want to come work at my tanning salon? And I'm like, great. You know, like, and I go in there selfishly, like, you know, I'm going to get like free tans. I'll get to work at the front, you know, like, and I get to the tanning salon and, you know, those signs you see people spinning on the side of the road? And I remember calling my sponsor and going, this dude wants me to spin a sign on the road. Like, and it was a busy road. It wasn't like, it was like, if it was like one that was like on a residential area and I'd only run into a few people, I probably wouldn't care. But it was like I think it was like on like very busy road on Jacksonville. And I remember feeling like I was going to freaking hyperventilate. Called my sponsor and I was like, dude, she was like, you want money for groceries and that electricity bill, right? And she hung up on me. And guys, I used to have to wear the big sunglasses because I was sobbing so hard holding that sign. And I was doing that job for a couple of weeks, and my husband, we were dating at the time, I think he was, and I'd get home from work and I'd lay in bed and be like, I can't believe I have to do this. It's so embarrassing, like just licking my wounds. And he was just so tired of dealing with like how sorry I felt. Like, cause when you're around that energy, like, and I've been that sponsee, I've spawned, and you just feel like, when people feel so sorry for themselves, that energy just sucks everybody else's energy out of the room. And he was sick of it. And he was like, maybe you should listen to AA tapes or something when you're out there to fix your attitude, and and I did, and it's like, but it's, I think that sometimes, guys, like alcoholism, we start, right? And then like God gives us like the little nuggets, and I listened to a tape, and I can't even tell you who was on that tape, but he basically talked about his job after sobriety and how God had given him a job where he basically had to work by himself because he was so mean, and he just had to be by himself because he just couldn't be trusted to be around others. And it made me think about myself, and it was like, you're so mean, you're so condescending. When you interact with people, they feel bad after interacting with you. Like maybe this is the job this is the job God needs you to have, so you can't hurt anybody. And and as soon as I was like, okay, God, I'm going to do the job that you gave me with the best attitude possible. And that's really what 6 and 7 is to me, guys. And it's so easy to go from like inventory straight into the amends because it's like 2 action steps, right? But 6 and 7 is so important because it's the change of heart that needs to happen before you go and face the people that you've harmed. Like, I need to be entirely ready. Like, I need to know and own those character defects so that I can wholeheartedly make it right. If I don't understand that those character defects hurt you and try to understand the extent of how they hurt you, like, how good is that amends really? Really, it's just an amends so that I can, check the things off my AA list. And then it's all about me again. If there's no 6 and 7 between 4, 5, and the inventory and the amends and everything else is still all about me. And in 6 and 7, I realized that April the alcoholic, that's who I am without God. And I need to desperately cling to God. Because I don't know if you guys have tried to work on character defects without his help. You just end up doing it over and over again, and it like keeps smacking you in the face. Like, that's my experience. And I'll give you like a little talk about anger. This is probably hard to believe, but I can be a little mean. And I know, it's shocking, I'm sure, to all of you. And I'm going to tell you, like, I've really been convicted the last year with how I talk to my kids. And the first thing is, like, I can get into, like, well, I'm not as bad at that, Mom. Like, I saw this mom, like, in the car line, like, it's so easy to do that. But I have a son, little Dylan, all 3 of them, lights of my life, but his heart is so tender and soft. Like, he's like the kid, like, his heart is just so big. He's the kid that stands up to the bullies. He's the kid who remembers everybody's birthdays. He's the kid when somebody, like, his heart is so amazing. Like, it's kind of embarrassing for me and my husband, but, like the kid who's at the birthday party who doesn't have the friend, he's always the one that loops people in, and, in this travel baseball thing, I've had to realize, like, and, I'm a little competitive, so, I've had to realize that some of my suggestions from my chair are not helpful. I've had to, like, not helpful. I had to realize that I'm sitting in that chair because I am not the coach. The coach is on the field. And, I keep telling him, he's like, when Mommy played softball, and, I've had to realize that he just needs his mom cheering him on. Like, I've had to realize, like, and I can sit there and justify, explain, like, if he just threw the pitch that way, we would have had the win, or, he just needs to remember that, with 2 outs, the play is always to first, but it's like, again, alcoholism speaks to me in my own voice, right? Selfishness, self-centeredness. Like, I think about what I'm thinking, right? My perspective. In 6 and 7, when I, am entirely ready and I ask God for help, one of the things that God does to me is he shows me that other people have perspectives too. That all of this life is happening and there's his perspective, and I need to consider his feelings instead of just my own justifications. And I've really had to realize, because he's so sensitive. My daughter, I can yell stuff all day during her softball games, and she'll just give me the finger if she doesn't like what I say. Chip off of the old block, you know what I mean? And I swear to you, you know what I mean? It's I told her, she had a softball game. And I was like, "Are we gonna hit bombs like Freddie Freeman?" She's like, "Always, baby," and but I've had to realize, like, I parent the kids differently. Those jokes with Dylan are not funny to him. Like, what my son needs, because and I've learned that he's just beating himself up. He's a pitcher, so he's in the mound. Like, it's hyper competitive. It's hyper competitive. Like, the dads and the coaches are screaming at him constantly. Like, when he pulls up to the gate and sees his mom, he just wants me to go, "Great job, Bubby. You're the freaking best. You're my favorite baseball player ever." Entirely ready. And when I ask God for help, it's funny that, the character defects thing is like, I surrender it to God, and then God starts dropping those nuggets, and I make choices on how to deal with them. And I have to put my ego aside with all of that. And I wrote down some stories we're going to talk about Big Dylan. I met somebody in Alcoholics. I did an inventory, and when I did that first inventory, my sponsor had suggested to me that I shouldn't date anybody for a year, because I was very sick in that area of my life. But my husband got out of treatment like a week later, and we met at a meeting. And but one of the things that she made me do is she explained to me that it was the dangers of relationships and alcoholism. And she actually made me write in my first big book that, if I wasn't going to apply the principles, if I wasn't going to do the right thing in this relationship, that I really was not going to date an AA for a while. Because she explained to me, she was like, AA needs to be a safe place, and you don't want people talking about you, and you don't want, and like, thank God for good sponsorship. And him and I got together, and it was very alcoholic. And we've had 3 beautiful kids, but we've really grown up in AA together. And I'm going to tell you, like, he's a brilliant man. Like, he got sober. He got sober. He went back to school, got a master's, got a CPA license. Made amends, got a great job running a Florida office, and ended up moving to another, like, he's at this, like, I'm going to brag on him a little bit of what God has done in his life. And, in the history of his company, he's gone to this huge accounting firm, like this national firm. He is the fastest promoted man in that company. He's just really amazing. And, but I say all of that to let you know that, like, as we've had kids, like, he got to do all of that, and I got to back up a little bit in my career for my kids. And it's the right thing to do, because I'm going to tell you, like, during COVID, when I'm going to loop some stories together. When I got fired from that job, there was like a part of me that, like, I couldn't forgive myself for it. Like, I was like, you were a jerk. Like, I just couldn't forgive myself for it. And during COVID, I had an opportunity to go work for another huge firm, like, right before COVID. And then I ended up getting fired during COVID because, the world shut down, and I was the last hire. And I remember that drive home just weeping and weeping and weeping and weeping. And I get home, and I'm, like, kind of in my prayer. I have a prayer corner in my house, and I'm weeping, and I'm in just so much pain because I got fired. And my little Bubby, my little Dylan, comes in, and he's like, "Mom, are you okay?" And I was like, "Dude, I got fired." And he goes, "Why are you so sad to have more time with me?" And that's how God slaps me with the 2x4, and in my heart of hearts, I know I'm so happy. Like, I love my kids. They're the light of my life. But, like, greedily, I've also wanted that. I was like, I'm smart. I got the Oprah scholarship. Why aren't I running shit? Like, sorry, I cursed. Like, but there's like a part of me that was like really very jealous of my husband. And he's like doing his thing, the kids aren't crying for him in the middle of the night. And I'm going to tell you, I've been doing work on this resentment and how angry I have been at him. And, my youngest just recently went to school, and, it's funny, in the last year, I've started 3 businesses, and my life professionally is it's like all in God's time. God knew my heart. He just said, get those kids to school, and now we're going, right? But I was doing some inventory work on it too. But I also have to realize, I stayed with the kids, but I also was not making the risks that Dylan was willing to make. Dylan was betting on himself. And I was very scared to bet on myself. Again, the low insecurity. And I was taking out my insecurity on my husband, my number one teammate. And trust me, guys, when I'm angry about something, I'm not that easy to live with. And when we ask God for help, God shows us ourselves. And when we're entirely ready, and I've had to make amends for that. And I hate, part of amends, how I've been taught to make amends, is you have to start with, I was wrong. I hate that. But again, that division was in my home. Again, those character defects. It was creating division in my home with my partner, and my kids were feeling it. And to say that I want to bring love, I want to bring light. You know what I mean? And I was doing that in my home. And that's why the character defects aren't cute, and it's and one of the ways how I kind of keep it simple is it's am I, it's when we're entirely ready, one of the kind of hold up the mirror, what kind of energy am I bringing to this situation? And that's usually the gut check. When I'm doing things with you, are you feeling good to be around me? And if not, we have to look at 6 and 7. Am I justifying a defect here? And if I'm struggling letting that defect go, am I asking God for help? So let me tell you about the moms at my kids' school, guys. So, my kids are in Catholic school, and when I did this inventory the first time with Amanda, there's this mom, man. She's one of us. I know she's one of us, man. And confusion and disharmony everywhere she goes, right? And we hosted a gala together, and she made it all about her, and I was trying to be good in the program, but I was mad it was not all about me. And it's just and I'm going to tell you, it's kind of been public knowledge, administration will not put our kids together. And I almost pulled my kids out of that school last year. And the principal called me into her office. And, it's bad when you're almost pushing 40 and the principal's calling you into the office. And guys, I love being a Catholic. I genuinely do. One of the gifts that sobriety has given to me is I've been able to reconnect with my faith. And it really, I feel God in such a big way there. Thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous, for that. And she's and she knows I'm a daily mass goer. We believe that when you experience the Eucharist, you get to experience the true physical presence of God. That's kind of a big deal, right? So she's so why are you pulling your kids out of the school, since we're the only school that kind of can offer that? And, we started talking about just, the stuff, and genuinely, not to get into the justification of it, I was I'm just genuinely, this family is creating situations where the kid is so out of control that I am worried about the learning environment my child is having. I am worried that his experience with Catholicism is going to be one of hypocrisy instead of, what I believe it should be. I believe that this should be something where our kids experience God and learn about how good and beautiful God is. That's what I want for my kid. And man, she heard me. I'm going to tell you, we had that meeting, and she made some changes, to really help my children have a great experience. And thank you, God, for that. So I'm going to tell you about the library at our school. Last year, Vicky, her name is, we'll call her Miss Muppet. And last year, like one of the volunteer things that I do at the school, I love reading. I have been involved in our library every year since my son has been there since preschool. He's in 4th grade now. Last year, she was in charge of the library, and she made sure I was not allowed to enter that library ever. So that librarian went away, and one of the teachers is like trying to semi-retire. A teacher who loves me was appointed to be the new librarian. And I get that information. I call her over to the summer, and I'm like, hello, Mrs. Teacher. There's usually a parent who is appointed. I'd love to be your parent. And I get in there, because I'm maneuvering now. Because, in my baby Dougie, it's his first year, and I'm not going to be outed during baby Dougie's first year. And so I get the role, and the school year starts. And at our school, there's a lot of, the group chats with the moms. And she's like blasting me in every chat. Like lots of the character assassination stuff, and a lot of the rumors she had started during the gala, she's redoing, and they're not true, by the way, and man, I was pissed, and I don't know about you guys, like me and my husband have this joke. It's like, are Mother Mary today or Saint Joan of Arc? Mother Mary today or Saint Joan of Arc? And man, I was ready to ride at dawn over the library. I was ready to oh yeah, this is But again, it's like division or unity. And I thought about poor Mrs. Kissel, after that shooting in Minnesota, the work that's been on administration for the kids is out of control, guys. In the amount of phone calls she's so the library drama is going on during all these changes she's trying to implement after Minnesota. And I had to take a step back, and it's like, am I really going to go to this woman who worked so hard for my kids to make sure my kids were okay this year? She has so much work because of this horrible thing that has happened. She's having to make decisions like preschool's no longer allowed to come to Mass because she says, I don't want toddlers' blood on my hands. She's hiring police officers to make sure that we are fully protected. She's making changes to keep our Mass times, private so that no strangers can come into our church. She's buddying little kids with big kids during Mass. So, she's running code red drills so that our kids know how to respond in the case of an emergency. And I was like, are you really going to bother this woman with the library? And, we had a huge fundraiser event because we had to raise some money because she's also implementing a surveillance system. And I'm like, look at everything she's doing. Do you want to help her or distract her from what she's doing? And this is what God revealed to me in prayer. And, I ended up making amends to her. I was like, since that gala thing, I know that I've been the center of controversy. I was like, I don't want to do that to you anymore, Mrs. Kissel. I was like, I want to be a helper. And I was like, I want you to know that I see how hard you're working for us, and I want to help you. I don't want to distract you from what your primary purpose is here. And I remember telling her that, and her shoulders just dropping when I told her that. And she was like, thank you so much for seeing it. She goes, these mothers, she goes, I get 300 emails a day from moms. And then they're mad if I don't respond or I don't respond. She was like, I had knee surgery last year. Everyone knew I had knee surgery. And she was like, and I had 500 emails within 24 hours of just random stuff. And I was like, I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't want to do that. And I'm going to end with this story. It's again, what kind of energy are we bringing into the world? How am I as a sober woman affecting you? Do you feel better after being around me? And if I'm creating division, I believe at the heart of 6 and 7, we're creating the division because something needs to heal on the inside, right? And so when I was not sober, I had backpacked through Europe, and I had gone to Paris. And I was walking around Paris, and very alcoholic woman, and again, I'm a Catholic, and I remember walking through Notre Dame and just this feeling of needing to go to confession. Those little God voice. And I'm just like, oh no, I'm not going to. And I remember going, oh no, I'm not going to do that, because I'm like knee deep in my alcoholism. I don't want to tell some priest like the things that I'm doing. You know, and somewhere, somehow, the courage comes and I do it. And I remember him holding my hand and telling me that I needed to get sober. And I was 21. I want to get sober for like 7 more years. And I'm a firm believer, guys, that what we do in steps 6 through 12 is that God voice gets louder. The work we do in 6 through 12, the voice of alcohol, like our reality untwists so that we can be sober people who can fully align with God. We can hear God's voice and we can do it. You know, I went to Paris a few months ago with my little girl. And we went to Notre Dame. And I remember just going, I'm going to go to confession and see if God does it again, you know? And and I get to confession, and I'm with my little girl, and the priest comes out and goes, is that your daughter? And I go, yeah. He goes, can we bring her in during the confession? And I'm like, yeah, my stuff isn't that juicy anymore, and thank you, AA, for that I could do basically, like, and that's all AA, is that I can do a confession in front of my daughter and not have to, like, and I am so thankful for God in AA, you know, and I'll give you the nugget he gave me, because I think it's what it's at the heart of step 6 and 7. Is, again, that division, that lack of trust. It comes from pain that needs to heal, right? And I give him my confession, and he looks at me and goes, you just don't believe in how deeply God loves you. He goes, if you knew how much God loves you, there wouldn't be a need for any of that. And I'll tell you what he gave me, because I've been using it all the time ever since. He goes, you know, when you close your eyes in meditation, just imagine God like your Father holding you. And do the meditation until you can feel the love of God. And when I get anxious, when I feel like I need to ride at dawn over the library, you know what I mean? Like, I pause and I remember that meditation and I let God speak to me. And he continues to change my life. And thank you for my life. That's it for me. Thank you.